Well, the bankruptcy case of genetic testing site 23andMe is bringing forward an interesting case around personal data to dive deeper into. What should people do who have provided personal data to one company but see it get sold to another? Gideon Nave is Associate Professor of Marketing here at the Wharton School, and he joins us right now. Gideon, great to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Always great to talk to you too.
I would guess that when you have instances like this, that for the most part, people don't necessarily even think about the data. It's just kind of part of doing business here.
Yeah, I mean, we do know that our data is everywhere and moving around between entities sometimes without a very clear understanding of us and transparency of this process. But I think genetic data is something a bit more special than just what we buy and what we like on Facebook.
What makes this so important in your mind?
There are several layers here, but I'd say the number one layer is that our genetic data is something that we cannot change about ourselves. We are born with it. You can measure it for us even before we are born, and it continues to follow us throughout our lives. So, I may be able to change my behavior, but I will not be able to change my genetics. And my genetics includes information for many other things that, because they are determined by genetics, even to some degree. I mean, many things are just partly determined by genetics, like personality and so on. But even these things, the genetic component of it, I will not be able to change about myself, and this data includes information about it. Not to mention that lots of these things are things that I even don't know about myself, that maybe are in the data and I'm not aware of it. Maybe I will even choose to not know. Deliberately, I will not want to know about it. That's just the first layer. I mean, I can continue with many other layers.
So the concern would probably be if a company were to acquire the data that maybe is not necessarily in that field, but is looking to maximize potential profitability of that data.
Yeah, I mean, let's say it this way. They say it in the Silicon Valley that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. We kind of agreed to the fact that we are customers, and as a result of being customers, we are providing something which is our data to the companies, which makes them live and survive. But again, this is a bit different for the case of genetic data. We actually paid companies like 23andMe to give us a service, to genotype us. And the sad thing about this company is that once they gave us this service, we don't have a strong reason to continue being a customer, right? So it's not like their genetic data now keeps giving us a lot of value once we got the genetic report. Again, unless there are some progresses in genetic research, and then they can give us some additional insight, which they did and actually didn't work so well. Part of the reason that it doesn't work well is that genetics, in most cases is informative of things, but it's not deterministic. It gives you some probabilistic knowledge that with the current level of genetic data is relatively small. We actually never gave 23andMe our data just, hey, go do research with our data or go advertise with our data. But they have this data and they can use it. The question is whether we are now in a kind of a unilateral situation where we don't get benefit from our data given to them, and they can still benefit from our data. And this is a bit, I guess, an issue related to autonomy and to informed consent. Of like, do I want this to be done? If the answer is yes, then, many people did give informed consent to 23andMe to use their data for research, and I think that this is great. If you're not okay with this, then you can ask 23andMe to delete your data. You're legally allowed to do this. Here, maybe we want to thank the European Union for giving us this right to be forgotten. And you can ask any company, whether it's Facebook or 23andMe, to forget about you. And if you're not fine with it, go do it.
But how do we avoid the misuse of this personal data, this genetic data? And I guess from a regulatory landscape, you mentioned about what Europe has done around this topic. Obviously, we don't have the same kind of structure here in the United States, but it becomes a more important topic as we move forward, since our lives are so much more digital than they were a couple of decades ago.
It's an extremely important topic, and it goes beyond genetics. But I think genetics has several components that make it especially alarming. Like genetic data is considered very sensitive also within medicine. How do we deal with it? Well, I think first of all, many of the GDPR regulations are very much adopted by American companies because they also serve European customers. Uh, I think that one potential limitation of the regulations is the thing that with consent, you're allowed. The companies can do everything they want, and we are consenting to numerous things every day. Like every time we are going to a new website, we are consenting to stuff. We have become so automatically consenting to everything that it's very clear that nothing is going to stop us probably from consenting to many other things we don't want. And then, we have to go back, and there is a lot of effort of thinking of what did I consent to and where will I... it's an issue. It's a problem. I mean, there may be a business opportunity here for companies that will kind of try to look at what did you consent to and try to figure out where your data is.
One of the things that I saw noted in looking at what we might see play out with the 23andMe bankruptcy process is also whoever that company is who comes in and maybe acquires it is having a level of transparency so that the customers of 23andMe truly understand where this data is going to be potentially living and going down the road.
Absolutely. And I think that as a society, we have a very strong interest that this data will be collected. 23andMe is a company that is very important for the future of medicine. It's a company that collected data that facilitated breakthrough discoveries of research. Even, you can say genetics maybe has not delivered as much as we hoped for when the Human Genome Project concluded, and we thought that we were going to solve all of our problems. But we do gain a lot, and it's actually crucial that we have very large samples when it comes to genetic data. So we actually, all as a society, are kind of in a place where it's good for us that everyone gives their genetic data, but we do have to pay a price for it. We do know also that there are data breaches. There are a lot of potential downsides here, and this is like a classical place where you need regulation. I think that in a place like this, where the benefit is of society, but the data is so sensitive, I think regulation must take place. And at the moment, we don't have much of it. We have regulation about using genetic data for insurance, for job applications, and so on. We don't have it for many other things. And so once this is the case, it's a bit of a broken area where we have to depend on maybe the GDPR, which is related to any types of data. We rely on the consent. We rely on the companies not actually just unilaterally modifying the agreements that they have with us and doing stuff with the data. Yeah, there are a lot of problems here. I personally can tell you that I was a customer of 23andMe, and I told them that I want my data. I will have my data, but I don't want them to keep my data because at the moment I don't feel like I have control of where it's going to go. And it's a bit sad because I'm using data of many people in my own research where I'm using it to identify genetic variations that are related to all sorts of human conditions, which I find very important.
Gideon, great to talk to you again. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Gideon Nave, Associate Professor of Marketing here at the Wharton School.